Welcome back to Farming Simulator 22, and today we're going to be having a look at Proseed, which gives you fields that look like this. So let's roll the intro and we'll have a look at it, shall we? So if you have Proseed installed, when you attach a seeder, it brings up the HUD for Proseed, which is really cool. To access the HUD, you have to middle click. That does disable the keyboard controls for the rest of the game, I have found, and that's kind of confused me a few times. So if you find that you're using Proseed and you can't, for example, steer the tractor, if you middle click, that will fix that. So middle click brings up control of the HUD. Along the top, we've got our seed usage, our hectares of land seeded, and our hectares per hour. And then if you want to reset that, you can reset that with this little guy here. We have three modes of operation for Proseed. We have manual mode, where you use the Control and R key to enable the tram line. So you can see down here the tram lines are being displayed. You have to have the HUD. You can't have the cursor visible. If you have the cursor visible, that won't work. We then have semi-automatic mode, and what happens with that is every time you raise and lower the seeder, so we have it, actually we need to change, I'll come to this menu in a moment, but what happens is when you raise and lower the seeder, it counts when you do that and switches on tram lines for you as is appropriate. Okay, and we then have automatic mode, and as you'll see, it's saying GPS is not active on this vehicle, and this works with Wopster's GPS mode and automatically disables and enables the tram lines depending on which lane you are on for your seeding, which is really cool. I mostly use it on semi-automatic mode because I use VCA GPS. So we have then got the distance option. So if you're on manual mode, this is grayed out because these aren't relevant because you're manually setting when your tram lines appear. If you're on semi-automatic or automatic mode, this is the distance that you want between tram lines. And it's multiples of the width of your implement. So narrowest would be 6, which is 1. For us, we've got a 6 meters, so that would be putting a tram line in every single row. And then it gives me just increasing from there in increments of the width of your seeder. Not sure how high it goes. 72 meters, that's pretty wide. We're going to run at 18 meters, just because that's quite nice for demonstrating what's going on. If you're in semi-automatic mode over here, you also have these track controls, and where we have a 18 meter tram line width, that's three tracks, and so the first track nothing happens, second track tram lines are on, third track no tram lines, and this is managed automatically with the raising and lowering of the seeder. So you can see the track number is changing there as we raise and lower the seeder. This mode also sort of works with courseplay. Might cover that in this video, depends how long it gets because I have quite a lot I want to cover with this. So looking further down the menu, we've got enable or disable fertilizing. So if you've got a seeder that has a fertilizing option, you can disable it using this. This option gives you a visual pre-emerge marker. It doesn't have any effect on whether the tram lines appear or not, so if you turn this off, you just get a more uniform seeding, but as the crops come through, the tram lines appear. I like to leave it on because I like to see it. Over here we have the option to shut off half of the seeder, and you can see at the bottom here, this half of the seeder is now shut off and this half is active, and you can have it the other way or all on. The reason you might want to do that is if you're running an even number, so say 12 meters, you'll want to do your first run with only this half of the seeder active, and then activate the whole thing and put your first tram line in. It's a really good PDF which I'll link below from Wopster explaining the how you set tram lines up with different multiples. I like to stick with an odd number just because it's easier. So that's the HUD. If you want to move it around, if you middle click, and then you can drag it around and you can minimize it using this button. The other thing, there is an audio effect. If you're a regular to the channel, you'll know that I generally play without sound, so I'm not sure what it sounds like, so we're going to find out as we test it. So we'll just do a few quick examples, and then I'll actually see the field and we'll see how it looks. So I also have headland management mode on, which I'm going to use with VCA GPS in a bit. Okay, so if we start off on manual mode, we have canola selected, because it's visually quite a nice crop. It's going to select our seeder and switch it on. And we'll drop that down and we will just head off forwards. So you can see here we are just seeding perfectly normal. If we hit Control R to enable the tram lines, you'll see that we then get 2 tram lines appearing in the field. The slightly lighter texture, just try and get a good angle on that. There you go. So you can see there are our tram lines. And then if we disable the visual marker and keep driving, you'll see the seeding goes back to being uniform, but I will progress time so you can see what these look like as they are growing. So that's manual mode. If we just do Control R again, we can switch off the tram line, and we'll just do another little bit. Okay. So that's manual mode. That can be quite useful for headlands. Alright, let's just do a little bit of semi-automatic mode. And I am going to use this with the VCA GPS just because it's easier. And it's how I generally use Proseed, sorry, brain fart. When you're starting a field, I would start it with the track number on the last track number, because as soon as you drop it down, it's going to increment it. So you'll see up here it's taking it to track 1. So that's a little tip, is if before you start, just use the arrows here to set it to the last one. And then we will drive ahead a little bit. You can see we're on track 1 at the moment. And then if we raise the seeder up and go across to our next track, and then lower down, and you'll see that straight away our tramline indicators have come on the HUD down here. And if we will put on the visual marker as well, just because I like it, and you'll see we have our tram line appear. And then if we lift up again and do one more turn, and then as we lower the seeder down, the tram lines will go off, and there we go. So that's a little bit seeded with the VCA GPS on a semi-automatic mode. We'll just get set up now to use the Wopster's guidance steering. Okay, so I've got GPS enabled. This is definitely not a tutorial on how to use guidance steering because I don't use it very often. So, but what we'll do is if we just disable it, and if you watch as we go across the tracks, you see that as we go into track 2, the tram lines come on. Then as we go across to track 3, they go off, and off for 1, and on for 2. So let's just demonstrate that with a little bit of seeding. And so why do you want tram lines in your field? For me, this is very much mostly a visual thing. So it can really help with knowing where to run your fertilizer spreader or your weed sprayer and that kind of thing. So if you set your tram lines up right at the start, you just drive through them to do your spraying and your spreading. So you'll see we've come into track 2 and the tram lines have enabled. For me, I like the visual effect. If I look at the fields around me in spring and summertime, they are full of tram lines. Because in the real world, when you drive over the crop, you destroy it a bit. And the thing is, with FS crop destruction, you don't get really good looking tram lines if you just drive over the crop. So this is a way of giving you really nice looking tram lines, and you can see we've had the same effect that we get our tram line. The nice thing about using this option is if you want to go Jeremy Clarkson style and skip a row, Proseed knows which row you're on, so it will automatically enable or disable your tram lines for you. So you won't end up with all your tram lines stacked up at one end of the field because you don't want to do full turns. So you see we skipped a row there, we'll just get onto this row, and Proseed is perfectly handling how it does the enabling and disabling of the tram lines, which is really cool. I just find VCA's GPS much easier for me to use, which is why I use it. You can use your preferred method of doing GPS, and if you're using Wopster's GPS, you can still use semi-automatic mode if you want as well, or manual mode. It's entirely up to you how you operate it, but you can see that that has dealt with us skipping some rows and it's not been an issue. If you were doing that with manual mode, you have to be a bit more switched on to make sure you're getting on the right row. So if we just skip ahead some time, we'll get these crops to grow and we'll see what the effect looks like. So you see it's now the next day or month and our crops have grown a bit, and you can see with the bit we did in manual mode that the see where we started, there are no tram lines, and then we switched tram lines on, and then we did the tram lines without the pre-emerge marker and they all look exactly the same. We've got a bit we did in semi-automatic mode where every third run is going to have a pair of tram lines, and then the two strips we did with GPS running in automatic mode. You can't really see that, so I'm just going to jump in the tractor. Should have put flight mode on. And there we go, you can see that we have our tram lines. So that's the basics of how to use it. What I'm going to do now is just go through, probably in a time lapse, planting a field with using VCA and headland management, and we'll see how that looks, and then we'll just do a quick why would you do it. So we're back with the field reset, and I'm going to do wheat this time just so you can see what that looks like. And I said we're going to use VCA GPS for this, so we're going to put it into semi-automatic mode. I'm going to stick with 18 meters just because I said I think it looks nice. And there's an 18 meter spreader in it. With a small field, it will just give us enough tram lines to make it a good visual effect. Bigger fields, you're probably going to have bigger sprayers and therefore bigger spacing. I could actually run this the wrong way to show you, but we'll do that 18 meter spacing on here. So we want to be on track 3, ready for when we lower it down. And then I am going to set up my VCA GPS. I'm going to use it on the long runs of the headlands as well. And I'm just going to turn the tractor off randomly for no reason. I need to turn seasons off. Where are you, seasons? There we go. Okay, so our first row is without a headland, obviously because we want to put a tram line. Sorry, without a tram line, we want to put a tram line in every third row. But for the start, this row is a normal row. The next row will have a tram line. I think this is much better than the lane driver mod that I previously looked at, because this actually works by turning off bits of the seeder rather than running a cultivator behind you. So the benefit of that is when you get to the corner, you can just drive around it. Now we haven't made that turn, so we're going to have to lift the seeder up. That means when we put it back down, it's going to count that as a drop on the seeder. So we're going to have to manually put that back a row. So if we knock it to 3, because we're on row 1 still. It just depends whether you can make that turn or not. And it's only a problem on headlands, so headlands are always a bit funny, aren't they? And it depends how you do your headlands. If you do your headlands where you just actually do the 2 short end rows, it's probably easier, but it might be harder to link in the tram lines. The bit that I have never mastered is properly linking in nice neat tram lines. We're going to turn earlier here, and we're going to try and manually get round without having to raise and lower. Yes, we'll miss a bit of the field, but I'm not too worried. So we're going to do what's going to end up as 2 headlands on here. You might think you want to do 3, but 2 works. So I've started using this on my Calmston Let's Play, and I really like it. So I have used it with course play, and if you put it into semi-automatic mode to use it with course play, you need to babysit it a little bit to get it to work properly, but it does work. Might not be as good as if you do it yourself. This is really a mod for driving yourself, but it will work with course play on semi-automatic mode like we have it now. And if you want to see it in action on that, watch my latest Calmston video. I can't remember which episode number it is. I'll put it on screen as to which episode it is of my Calmston series. Okay, so we now need to start making our tram lines. But I'm actually going to start the tram line right from here. Now I don't know how realistic this is, but for me you'd want an entrance into the tram line system. So I start that right from the edge of the field, and this gives you your tram lines. And so I really like this mod. For me it is very much a visual effect, but it adds a lot of realism to how the fields look compared to what I'm used to seeing anyway. And if you're then coming back with, you know, if you had an 18-meter herbicide spreader, you could just drive around the tram lines and you'd be pretty good. So we are going to try and swing this one in one go. Yes, we'll miss some bits, but it'll be sort of okay. And so for me this is a visual effect. There might be a much better way of getting this perfect, but I think you want to keep driving, because if you don't, you're going to get weird corner effects. You're going to get weird corner effects anyway, but the grid that Farm Sim is played on is not fine enough to get absolutely perfect tram lines. And if it was, you'd need probably like 2 3090s running in your PC. So yeah, that's why the tram lines look quite coarse in the, well, once the crop is growing. That's the grid size of the crop in the game, and if you, to get really good tram lines, you need massive compute power. Whatever you think, you don't have enough to do that. Not if you want to have more than about 3 frames a second. So yeah, just coming along to the end of our headlands. We're only going to do 2 headlands. I'm going to try and sort of link these tram lines up. The edges don't really work brilliantly, but you know, we'll do something like that. So we can now just get into our up-down rows. So we want to pull far enough ahead that we're not going to destroy the tram line that we've made. Put that down and off we go. So I'm going to get the rest of this field seeded, and I will be back with you in a few moments.
We got our windows down, driving down the 405, sing along to the radio. We're gonna make it someday, nothing's gonna get in our way. We will be the biggest band in town. Round and round the world we'll go, putting on the greatest show. So make sure that you don't miss out, just be there. We're taking our shot, bring what you got. We're going all the way to the top. We will hear the sound of 1 million people screaming our names when we're backstage. We'll play loud, surfing the crowd. Everybody's jumping around. Yeah, that's the place where I wanna be. Going on stage, headline on a Saturday night. Oh, 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 Saturday night.
So we are getting close to being done I did say I was going to use headland management mode, so did get that, and that's the beep you can hear running now, is that we are in headland mode. It's actually quite annoying. This tractor didn't want to do those turns with the automatic headland turning. It's a bit big to get around that, and we are going to get an unfortunate double tram line here. Just how it works with the width of the field. I'm not sure how farmers would deal with that in real life. Whether they'd accept the missed crop when they spray or put 2 tram lines in. They're going to put 2 tram lines in. But yeah, it's going pretty well. The moment at the start of the time lapse where I ended up driving off the end of the field was me switching to OBS to try and turn off the sound for recording the time lapse, just because it makes editing ever so slightly easier. And yeah, that didn't work so well, did it? But yeah, we're getting a double tram line here, which is slightly unfortunate. I don't think there's anything we could have done about that except not plant one of the rows of the field. But yeah, we'll get this finished and then we will skip ahead some time and see what the effect looks like, and we'll get a sprayer out and we'll just see why you might want to do this. So if we skip ahead some time, we should see a little bit of growth because we're not on seasonal play. Purely because it's not necessary for this. It always rains the next day. But if I jump in the fen, we can now see we have our field with the tram lines in and the double tram line. So yeah, I'll get set up to do some spreading or spraying or something, and we'll come back and have a look at that. Thunder. So a little bit like with the driver lane demo, I've not set this bit up perfectly because the field is already fertilised and it doesn't have weeds. But we've got a solid fert spreader here set on an 18-metre spread width. So if we drive along our tram line, you should see that we're covering sort of half of the distance between. And yeah, we would just now drive around the field, around the tram lines, and we should fertilise pretty much everything. Which I think is just, you know, it's a really cool way of getting things done. It's a really nice mod. That's the bit of the tram line that I drove through when I was seeding. So you can see that sometimes the edges where they meet up aren't perfect, but I really like it as a visual effect. It's really good. Yeah, we have this weird double tram line here. But if you're a regular to the channel, you know I'm a scientist, not a farmer. And I've put a lot of thought into how the heck you try and do some of these tram lines sometimes, and including watching on or looking on Google Maps, and I still couldn't work it out. But yeah, if we now go down our first row, yeah, if the field actually needed fertilising, we would be fertilising the bit that we missed. So I think this is a really cool mod. So if you like it, go download it from the mod hub. Don't download it from some shitty third-party site. Download it from mod hub and go into the in-game mod hub and rate it 5 stars, because that really helps modders out. Downloading it from farming simulator whatever.com mods dot whatever is shit. Don't do it. Yeah, and if you found this video useful, hit the like button, leave me a comment below. If you're not already, click subscribe, and I'll catch you next time on FS22. Welcome back to Farming Simulator 22, and today we're going to have a look at Proseed, which is a mod that I didn't use much in 19, but it really